Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, welcome to Blog Talk Radio. This is Lori Ann Smith, and it is June 25th, 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and my chat room is open if anybody wants to sit in there. That's great. And we're just going to continue on this morning, talking about emotional abuse. And we left off yesterday with an article. We finished actually an article with the Public Health Agency of Canada regarding emotional abuse from the National Clearinghouse, and finished that up. Then we started looking at another article. Actually, it's not an article, but it's a Survivor to Thriver workbook from the ASCA, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, a Morris Center program, and we started just taking a look at what they have in their Survivor to Thriver workbook regarding emotional abuse. So that's what we're going to do today, just kind of continue on through there. And yeah, I'm so glad that you could be here. I thank you for tuning into my shows, and I just really appreciate all the support. I have almost 6,000 shows listened to now, and every time I see that number jumping up like that, I just, I'm just so thankful because I realize that how many people are listening to my shows. And so I just thank you so much for tuning in and passing and sharing the show around, and it just means a lot to me. It really is an incentive for me to keep going. And, like I said, when I first started doing Blog Talk Radio, I had no idea how long I would even do it, and whether or not anyone would be listening, or if it would be worth, taking the time to do. So I really appreciate this very much, and can't thank you enough for tuning into my shows and all the support. Right, it's just awesome. So I'm not a professional counselor. I don't hold any professional certificates, in counseling or therapy. I'm just a private person who pays to do my own blog talk shows, and I just wanted to be one more voice out there for first of all, as a survivor of child abuse, for people to know that they're not alone, and that if they reach out and get some help and don't suffer in silence and suffer alone, they can have a good life too. And it's not like it happens overnight. It takes time, and so that's why I wanted to be just one more voice of encouragement, really, for people who have survived child abuse. And there's so many of us, right? So that's the whole problem. And also to be one more voice just to say that we need to stop child abuse. And I study child rights. I'm a part-time student, at MRU here in Calgary, and I'm just in between courses. Haven't been able to go back because I haven't been able to afford to go back. But I'd like to finish my certificate program and working towards a degree. So, eventually I'll be back in school. So I keep studying, and I just keep working all the time. I'm also the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and which makes me really happy. Volunteer position that I just love doing, and I love being a part of, and just to promote awareness, education, prevention of child abuse, right? So that's why I'm so thankful to be able to do these shows, just to be one more voice to get the word out there, raising our voices together. We're bound to make a difference, and that's the whole issue, just to stop child abuse, right? And so that's why I do these shows. I'm not a professional. You have to listen at your own discretion. The topics of abuse are very sensitive. A lot of people are very sensitive when it comes to the topic of abuse, and if you're a survivor who's on your healing journey and you've just started out, it could trigger you. So I always ask everyone to listen at their own discretion. And children under the age of 18, especially young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone just know that you're listening to this show, and maybe have them listen to it with you. And if you're a really young child, you want to have someone say that it's okay that you listen to the show, like your parents or your grandparents, or someone in the family who's older and can help you make that decision whether or not you should be listening. I don't know where the Blog Talk players are placed around on the different sites now. So I don't know how young the people are that are listening to this show. There's a lot of adult material on here. It's ultimately for children to stop child abuse, but I stand up for children's rights, and I'm fighting for children's lives every day. And so that's why you'd be doing yourself a favor and myself a favor if you would get permission to listen to this show, and also to protect yourself online at all times. There are lots and lots of great websites out there for children on how to stay safe online. And for parents, how to help their children stay safe online. So it's so important that you do get the information. Keep yourself safe. There's lots of people out there who will say that they are 12 years old and that they like to skateboard and they love to go to the movies, and they try to get young children to meet them after school, and they try to find out where they live, and they get this information, and it turns out that it's a child sexual predator, and they're not 12, they're like 35, and the child is assaulted and sometimes killed. And so that's why it's so important that you do not ever give out any personal information, and never tell anybody your real name. Don't use your real name when you're, like, for your own internet account. Never tell them where you live, what school you go to, who your teacher is. Never give out any names or personal information ever. Because people are, there's a lot of sick people out there, and they are trying to get a hold of children to assault them and to hurt them. And so that's why, I just ask that all children, young people, would have permission to listen to my show, and then let your parents and let your caregivers know, whoever's looking after you, to know what you do online and who you're talking to and who you're chatting with. It's just so important, because you could save your life and you could save your friends' lives, right? So we'll get right on with this article. It's a Survivor to Thriver workbook is what it is, from the Morris Center program, the Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, the Morris Center program, at www.ascasupport.org. And it's called the Survivor to Thriver workbook. It's free. Anybody can download it from their website. And I like their website. I go on there every now and then. I did download the book, and I actually, the workbook, and I printed it. So there's like 115 pages. It's a lot of material. It's specifically designed for adult survivors of child abuse, and it's very detailed and very, it's a good workbook, I think. We went through it a while back. I can't remember when we did those shows, so in my archives, they'd be there somewhere. So I don't remember exactly what date we were doing the shows, probably April maybe? So it's been a while. But I wanted to look at the portion that was specifically talking about emotional abuse, and because that's a topic we've been on all week, right? And so we left off yesterday on ignoring and isolating. So that's what I wanted to continue on with. And there's some recognized, like emotional abuse is like defined as a pattern of psychologically destructive interactions with a child that is characterized by 5 types of behaviors. And those behaviors, that's what we're going through: rejecting, isolating, terrorizing, ignoring, and corrupting. And so we went through rejecting, we've been through that, terrorizing and isolating, and now we're looking at ignoring. And you can pull this workbook up yourself. It's on page 44. That's what I'm reading from at www.ascasupport.org, and you can follow along. Ignoring entails depriving the child of essential stimulation and responsiveness, thereby stifling emotional growth and intellectual development. Ignoring refers to the condition in which, due to excessive preoccupation with their own issues, the parents are emotionally unavailable to the child. In contrast to rejecting, which is actively abusive, ignoring is passive and neglectful. Ignoring behaviors include not responding to the child's talk, not recognizing the child's developing abilities, leaving the child without appropriate adult supervision, not protecting the child from physical or emotional assault by siblings or friends, not showing interest in the child's school progress and focusing on other relationships, such as a new partner or, someone in their life, to the point that the child feels displaced. Emotional neglect may be the most common type of abuse, but it may also be the least reported. And so that's what they were talking about, ignoring. That's where we left off. Isolating is the next one. Isolating involves the adults cutting the child off from normal social experiences, thereby preventing the child from forming friendships and reinforcing the child's belief that he or she is alone in the world. Isolating the child from normal opportunities for social relations is another form of emotional abuse because it impedes the social development of the child. And included here are efforts by the parents to put the child at odds with friends, presenting outsiders as the object of suspicion, reinforcing the child's concerns about peer acceptance, and thwarting the child's attempts to be industrious and self-sufficient. Specific behaviors that tend to result in isolation are preventing children from seeing family or friends, preventing receipt of appropriate medical care, punishing the child's social overtures, rewarding the child for avoiding social situations, and prohibiting the child from inviting other children home, withdrawing the child from school, and preventing the child from joining clubs or dating. Because children tend to become more socially active as they get older, it is far easier to seclude a young child than an older child, right? Families that are members of strict or closed religious groups may be especially prone to isolation and have been known to keep their children out of school because the outside world so conflicts with their personalized beliefs and values. However, there are certain religions that do de-emphasize and even prohibit certain contacts with the outside world, especially those involving doctors and medical procedures. In these contacts, the isolating behavior does not necessarily constitute abuse. If you grew up in this kind of atmosphere, there may be an explanation for why your family engaged in isolating behaviors. Isolation is also common in families where father-daughter incest exists. In these cases, the father wants to keep the child at home to preserve his access to her or him, and to limit the possibility that the child will tell someone about the incest, or the daughter. Right? Many times, incest comes to light only after several years, when the girl is now a teenager, tells somebody in her peer group what has been going on at home. So isolation is very bad. You know what I mean? It's I didn't experience too much of that, but in a very small, maybe something similar to it, but not to that degree. You know what I mean? And where parents just keep their children very isolated, and they're not allowed to see their friends. They're not allowed to interact socially, with other other children their age. They're not allowed to to really be a part of the world. They're just kept at home and very isolated. And that wasn't the case in my case, but I have heard of people who have experienced that, and that's horrible. They don't get to, you wouldn't get to develop socially, properly, and it would all be, the world would seem like a strange place if you're just isolated at home all the time, and being sort of, whatever the abuse is, whatever type of abuse you might be going through, whether it's sexual or physical, verbal or whatnot, if you don't have a chance to interact with the outside world, then you wouldn't know that what's happening at home is wrong. And so a lot of times, isolating is just another way of controlling, right? And this can happen in domestic violence situations too, right? Where the abusive partner isolates the other partner, and that's quite typical, because they want the abuser wants the control, complete control of that other person. So they do whatever they can, to terrorize and isolate and really sort of make it like the other person feel that they don't really have a choice, that they have to do what that person says, and they're not allowed to leave the home, they're not allowed to see their families and friends. A lot of times abusive partners will move their whole family away from family members so that they have complete control, without anybody being able to look in and see what's going on within the house, within the home, and it's too far away for the other person to get home if they did choose to want to go home for a visit or whatever. You see that lots when people are abusive. People have complete control of the family, and there's no one stepping in to help. A lot of times they will move far away from their families and be able to continue what they do. I kind of wonder in my case if that's not what happened to my mom, because my parents were living in Canada. They were Canadians from Nova Scotia, and they were born and raised there, and they lived sort of on the eastern seaboard, the east coast area of Canada for many years. And then my dad decided that he wanted to move down to the States. So they packed up 6 kids and just whatever they could, and they drove down to move to the United States, right, way far away from their families. But their families were abusive, so they grew up abused. There was not, I don't know how close they all are. They're sort of close, but not really. There was a lot of dysfunction in both families, and so I think they might have been trying to break free and get free. But in doing so, what it did was it isolated my mom very much, and my siblings from their friends. They were no longer part of the Canadian world. They were down in the United States, so far away from what they had known, with no support. And then when my parents' marriage had already been a problem when they were or in their 20s. So like when they were first married, it wasn't good then, and it never did ever get any better. And so they were, in their late 30s or mid 30s when they moved down to the States. And so they had been going on already for many years in this kind of violent and abusive marriage, right? And the children experiencing abuse as well. And then I was born down in New Mexico, so that's how that happened. But my mom was very isolated. She didn't have her family around her. She didn't have her siblings or her sisters to help her out. and she was stuck basically in the home with all these kids, with a husband who was not treating her right, or the children, right? So it was very hard on her. She did make a few friends on the block that we lived on, and that's what I mean. She had a lot of support. Both my parents did, but what people did not realize, I think people felt sorry for them, and they did not realize that what was happening was that my parents were actually abusing us, and making it look like it was the children's fault, or it was just such a bad family. And so the people took my parents' side and didn't take the children's side, which is really wrong. And because the parents are supposed to protect their children, not hurt their children, and so they should have seen what was going on and done something about it. But there was an intervention done, and at that point we should have been removed from the home, and I was just a baby. So, this sort of thing can happen, especially when there's isolation right now. People are far away from their families and friends, and just, it allows the abuser to be able to really get away with what they want to get away with, which is to control and to completely control the lives of their family or their partner. So that's why it's very important for people who are suffering in a domestic violence abuse situation, to make sure you get some help. If you don't have your family or friends close by because you've been isolated, you want to reach out and get a hold of a domestic violence counselor, somebody like online support, group support on the telephone, whatever. Get a hold of somebody who can help you to deal with this stuff. I wish that my mom would have got some help. She had the opportunity. I talk about it quite a bit on my shows. She had the opportunity to get help. There was an intervention done. And at that point, my mom could have stepped up and said, look, we're having such problems, and I really want out of this marriage, or I want to help my children by, getting them out of the house, and I'd like to also get some help for myself. But she didn't do that. And my parents were very good at manipulating people. They had been manipulating people all their lives, I'm sure of it. So, my mom missed out because she could have actually got some help. And, at that point, my dad was told to go to get help for his borderline schizophrenia, and he didn't do that. He didn't go to any personal counseling sessions. My parents went to 2 court-ordered family counseling sessions, and then we moved out of the country. So that's pretty much that's what happened there. So the abuse just continued on. So that's why it's so important for people to get help, just to remember that there's crisis lines out there full of people just like me and you who, want to help people. So if you're feeling like you just can't cope, and you're having a lot of problems, and someone is abusing you or your children, and you just can't deal with it, you don't know what to do, make sure you do phone and phone someone, phone a crisis line, phone a 24-hour, domestic violence hotline, phone a child abuse hotline. Just talk to someone who can give you some real good, some good advice and some good help, So important to make sure you do get help and not suffer on and just have to spend a whole lifetime of misery when it's just completely unnecessary, which, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I watched my mom her whole entire life suffer, right? I mean, from the time I was born, right? But I knew her past and her background because she told me about what had happened in her home, and then I talked to her siblings, my aunts, and found out that what she was saying was true, and that, it was my grandmother was a very abusive woman. So she suffered her whole life. She suffered as a child in an abusive home. My grandmother killed one of her sons, my mom's brother, my uncle, and my grandmother did not do any time for it. As a matter of fact, she didn't even get, there was nothing said about it. She just, I don't know whether they just buried him out in the backyard. I have no idea. But anyway, my grandmother killed one of her own boys, and completely abused all the family members, including all the children, and a whole bunch of orphans that came to live with them in the 1930s. So my grandmother was a horrible woman, and that's my mom's mom, see. So my mom grew up like that and then passed it on to us, right? So she never got any help, right? So that's the whole issue, and that's why, and she suffered her whole life. And her and my dad, they could have had a great marriage, and they had a bunch of kids. They could have had a wonderful time with us 7 kids that actually made it. There were actually probably 10 that didn't, 3 didn't make it. So it's born and stillborn. So there would have been a big family. It was already big enough at 7, but they could have had a great time had they gotten some help, and we could have been a happy family and gone on to just be a normal family, but instead they didn't get any help. That's why I keep just really promoting people to get some help and not continue that cycle of abuse, and allow yourself to live a life that really wasn't your fault in the first place if you've been abused as a child, and then allow yourself to continue on as an adult to have a horrible life just because of the abuse that you suffered. Because it's just not right. at some point we have to draw the line and say, where does this stop, and where do I get to have a good life? Where do I get to feel good about waking up in the morning? Where do I get to feel good about being who I am in my own skin, in my own body, in my own life? You know what I mean? And that's what I really started to ask myself, like 3 years ago, about 3 years ago, three and a bit. So, that was some big questions for myself. I was very honest with myself. That's one thing that's very important to be. We have to be honest with ourselves and everybody else if we really want to make our healing journey actually useful. You know what I mean? And I started to sit down and think, why do I have to suffer because I was abused as a child? Why do I have to continue to keep this going? When now my life is fine. I'm just dealing with the aftermath of the abuse. And how am I going to get over it? And how am I going to learn to deal with it and process it and allow myself to heal? And that was a big step. And it was just about, I must have just been ready to do it. And at some point, I really hope that everybody will find that peace. You know what I mean? Because I'm telling you, it was kind of like a transition of night and day when that happened. Because my whole life changed. I started to realize, hey, I didn't deserve that, and that doesn't mean I have to carry a lot of anger and hatred around or destroy my life just to prove that I was abused as a child, or just to prove that how much damage was done to me. You know what I mean? I don't have to live a victim's life. I can live a survivor's life and go on and actually do as much as I can to help people, and also to enjoy myself and just be able to be happy with who I am and walk free from all that garbage that was put on me as a child. And so that's why I really hope people will reach out and get some help, no matter what it is, whether it's group support, online, group support, peer-to-peer support, therapist, counselor, whatever it takes, to make sure that you get the proper help so that you can heal and move forward. There's nothing worse than being stuck in slow motion, really, or maybe stuck in pause. That's what I felt like I was. My life was just stuck in pause. I was always just stuck right at pause and always feeling these feelings of just complete, anguish, really, at what had happened to our family and what happened to myself and what happened to my brothers and what happened when we were children and what happened to my mom. I was just stuck in replay pause, where it would just go and replay and then pause, replay, pause. In the meantime, I was living this life that was pretty decent. You know what I mean? I stopped doing drugs at the age of 21. Don't drink a whole lot. I don't allow myself to, bother with that kind of stuff too much. I've been trying really hard to work at a steady job and keep a job. I'm pretty good at keeping jobs when I want to. And I wasn't doing all that bad in my life, And I thought, why am I having such a hard time? Why can I not move forward from this? And I think it's just because I wasn't ready to allow myself to feel like a survivor instead of feel like a victim, and and allow that hatred and that anger and that misery to actually kind of be replaced by some other things. So, as all this good stuff was coming into my heart, love and peace, light and truth and comfort, compassion, goodness and mercy, and everything that should have been there as a child started to come into my heart, and it pushed out a lot of that negative stuff, that really bad stuff, the darkness and the anger and the hatred, right? So that's what happened. It was a complete transformation, and it doesn't mean that the memories aren't there and that I don't still know and understand why I felt like the way I did, and understand even today why I have hard times sometimes, and I have days where I just feel like, wow, just tired and drained, but it doesn't matter, because I know now that it wasn't my fault. I certainly didn't deserve it, and I know kind of how to cope, because I've learned how to cope, and it took me a while to do it, so it's not like it happens overnight. And so it took me the better part of probably a year and a half to get a grip on the whole thing. So if you're just starting out in your healing journey, make sure that you continue on at a slow and steady pace, whatever's comfortable for you, and get the proper help that you need that's comfortable for you. Whether it's a group support, or if you like to be in a group setting better. That's me. I like a group support because I think there's safety in numbers. I don't like to be singled out as a, it's the trust factor is still not quite there. You know what I mean? But I've met some counselors and therapists since I've been doing this Blog Talk radio shows, who are just awesome, and they have their own Blog Talk radio shows. And I'll give you one right now. This is an awesome Blog Talk radio show, Inspirational Voices radio show. C. Joyce Farrar Rosamond, and this is at she also has a website, www.womensempowerment, seminars.com. And on Blog Talk Radio, you can find her here. C. Joyce Farrar Rosemond. She's a radio host and author, motivational speaker. She's a very nice lady, and she deals with topics of abuse, women's issues, depression, empowerment, relationships, finances, and whatnot. She does shows the first and third Sunday of the month, right? And she has a Blog Talk show here, www.blogtalkradio.com/inspirational voices. And she's a really, really nice lady. I really like her. I've also met some other counselors and as well, and therapists, and they weren't at all how I pictured a counselor or a therapist. You know what I mean? My parents warped us and told us that our whole lives that all people wanted to do was get a hold of our information and use it against us, and so we had to keep everything to ourselves and, you know, not talk about anything. And my mom used to threaten my life if I told somebody what was going on in the home, you know. Even though I finally did when the intervention, that family intervened for me at the age of 13 and a half, of course I told them, but my mom knew I had told them because they had gone down to talk to my mom. And then when I got home, my mom was like, if you ever tell anyone ever again, I'll kill you. You know, she was very good at threatening and pushing me around. But the thing is I didn't care. I was like, well, you know, you haven't killed me yet, so I suppose we'll just continue on. And, so I realized it was probably just mostly a threat, but she could have killed me. She's a very powerful, strong woman. So that's the whole issue, right? I mean, a lot of times we just get beaten into the fact that we can't talk about things and we can't get any help, and just hammered into our heads and into our minds that we have to stay silent and it was our fault, and of course then you take the blame and you start to think the whole thing was your fault, and especially if your parents told you that a lot, and it made you feel bad, like that you were not wanted, and that this whole thing was just all because of you, sort of thing, puts the abuse on you, right? That sort of thing is very, very hard to deal with, and I just suffered on pretty much in silence for a long time. I told a few select people what had happened in my home, and even while it was going on. So there are people that do know what was going on, but the thing is I never really talked about it too much, and when I did, sometimes I would lose friends, if they found out about the abuse that I suffered, because they would think, oh God, she's too damaged, and I've had friends walk out of my life because of that, and so, and I've pushed some away because of that. So that's the thing, right? It's been a lonely road, and I quite often wouldn't tell people anything because it just didn't seem like the thing to do. So keep it to most of us keep it to ourselves and don't talk about it. So that's why it's so important to find a group support, like, an online child abuse survivors group website where you can become part of a community. You can join anonymously. You don't even have to give your real name, which is awesome. You have to when you join the site to the person who owns the site. But then, in the chat rooms and actually with your profile, you can put on an anonymous name or just a fake name. You don't have to use your real name, and you can keep it very much private that way. And this way, you don't have to disclose who you are, but you can still get some help, right? Because there are people, survivors out there who have to remain silent in fear of their lives, So if the abusers are still living and they're fearing for their lives, many times they don't want to come forward and say who they are, right? So there's a lot of places you can go anonymously to get help, and you don't have to have anybody know who you are at all. So this is the thing, it's just important to make sure you do get some help. And we can't talk about that enough, because, I wish I would have reached out and got some help a long time ago, is what I'm saying. It took me to the age of 41 to feel like I deserved to be on the planet, that I didn't want to kill myself, that I didn't want to self-injure and hurt myself, to show the pain that was in my heart, And so, I would hope that most people would not wait until the age of 41 to figure that out, and get a start on their healing journey, a little bit sooner than that, right? So that's thank you so much for tuning in. We've got about a minute left. We're going to continue on Monday looking at corrupting, and then go through the questions, the actual journal questions. You can pull this up at www.ascasupport.org and look at the Survivor to Thriver workbook. And there's journal questions that we're supposed to answer. Go through the safety first portion first. It's really important. It's like 34 pages long, safety first, just to see if you're actually in good enough shape emotionally to do the workbook. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Check out Dreamcatchers for Abused Children's website, www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. Tonight I'm going to be on with Donna Shearer at Blog Talk Radio facebook.com/dreamcatchers. We're going to be talking about my book a little bit. We have some more questions and comments coming in from people, and there were some more good questions that Donna thought we really should cover. So we're going to be on tonight talking more about my book, A Life of Death, The Redemption, and answering questions and comments. And I do appreciate all the comments and questions that came in about the book. It's just awesome. So we're going to be on for 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight for an hour. And then Monday night, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, we have Arnie Alberts. He's an author and he's a survivor, and he's going to be on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio as well at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that is www.blogtalkradio.com/dreamcatchers. So be sure and catch us. It's going to be Elizabeth Roberts-Brawley and myself, and our guest, Arnie Alberts. So make sure you have a great weekend, everybody. Take care of yourselves. If you need something, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio here. You can send me a message. And otherwise, because I am always checking my messages at least within a day. You know what I mean? And if you need something, get a hold of me on Facebook. If I can help you find some resources or information, right? It's very important to me. And if you have a question or whatever and you just need a friend, right? Look me up. I'm available. So take care of yourselves, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll be talking to you real soon. I'll be on this weekend with a few of my Blog Talk shows. I got to figure out what times they are. I've changed the times and whatnot, so I've got to go back and find out what time I'm supposed to be on. So have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you all next week. And hopefully see you tonight in the chat room over at Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. Have a very good day, everybody, and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.